Hello and welcome. My name's Hannah from To The Being Mindful Movement. Get yourself into some really comfy, cozy clothes and see if you can find somewhere relatively cushioned to work with on the floor. So if you've got some kind of mat, go ahead and roll that out. Perhaps you're on carpet or a rug. And if it is needed, you could even gather a couple of cushions. Maybe you'd like to even start with a pillow under the back of your head. You're really welcome to do that as we start nestling into our first pose of simply lying down. Take your time wriggling in to whatever feels a place of stability and comfort to begin with. So don't worry if you're still doing your little shuffles here, arranging your clothes, hair, or just creating that space that you need around you. And once you do find yourself in some kind of stillness, let's go ahead and inhale through the nose and just take a real easy, gentle sigh through the mouth. You're welcome to add that kind of breath at any point that feels necessary to reconnect to the now, if it's useful. Perhaps you could think of me just as a guide today. I'll be making several suggestions about how you might like to move your body. You're welcome to pause somewhere that feels more appropriate for your body. So don't feel that you have to match everything I say or what you see perhaps on the screen. Remember that this is your practice today. So as we lay here, what do you notice? Perhaps all you can notice is your mind racing, being elsewhere. Perhaps some of you are able to depict sounds that might surround you in this moment. Maybe it's that you feel the earth supporting you or feeling sturdy, strong, solid beneath your body. Perhaps you notice a temperature within the room or upon or in your body. Throughout our practice today, I'll be inviting you to come towards your senses. And for some of us, this can be useful as a grounding tool, just like a deep breath or a rhythmic breath. Again, these are all suggestions that you might try. And perhaps you'll figure out what works and what doesn't work for you in your own practice. As we continue to lie here, perhaps I could bring your attention to a few different body parts. And when I mention a body part, just notice whatever might arise for you. Without judgment, without critique, or without having to change something. See if you can just be with the sensation and maybe the image of that part of your body. So just noticing perhaps the back of your head and the connection to earth or pillow. And then going a little bit lower, and we'll stay with the parts of the body that might be connected to the ground. So what part of your upper back feels like it's touching the earth? And are any parts of the lower back touching the ground? Or perhaps we scoop our attention down now towards the buttocks, towards the thighs. Continuing attention of connection to earth and body. Lower down the leg to perhaps the calves. Noticing where perhaps on the back of the leg and the lower leg we lose connection to earth until we find connection of the heels and ground. We'll scoot our way up the body, a little more focused towards the back of the shoulders, and noticing perhaps now what parts of the back of the arms touch ground. Maybe the elbows, perhaps the forearm is touching the ground, perhaps it isn't. And just noticing now the back of the hand and the knuckles. Visualizing the body as a whole here. So at this point, I invite you now to draw your right knee in. So we work both legs initially, and now we're seeing what bringing one leg in might feel like. If we're finding that's really challenging to grab that knee and we just need a little bit more room, go ahead and place the left foot to the ground. That's completely up to you in your body in this moment. And that might give you just a little extra ease and space that you require, or it might just feel better. So noticing perhaps now the connection of that right back hip and the earth. Maybe you notice some deeper sensations through the front of the right hip. Starting off relatively still. And then again, inviting a little bit of movement if that feels right for you. Perhaps you hold on with one hand and add a few really small, minute semicircles or circles. For some of us, gentle swaying movement can be far more nourishing than complete stillness, and vice versa. So here again, just exploring what feels right for you in your body today. We're going to go ahead and swap the legs over before we take that time of rebound. So just take a moment to reposition yourself. Perhaps you step through slowly with a couple of rounds of breath. And here we are exploring what you need on that second side. So knowing that both sides can come up for us in different ways. And that can be dependent on perhaps past injuries or perhaps the way that we were born, for example. And also whether we overuse one side, underuse one side comparatively. And I'm afraid that stress also comes up for us physically in the body. So we can end up being a little lopsided due to muscles becoming quite tense. Perhaps again you're exploring stillness or movement. Last few breaths on that second side. And then go ahead and gently extend the leg or again placing the feet on the earth and the knees gently teepeed together, let's come to pause. This time, we're going to draw the knees in and roll to one side to make our way onto our hands and knees. So gently flipping over onto your front, and we're going to plant hands and knees to the earth. Now, if you have sensitive wrists, perhaps today being on the forearms will be helpful to you instead. If you have sensitive knees, perhaps doubling up the mat or getting some cushion or blanket under the knees will be supportive enough for you. So we're making our way into what we often refer to as tabletop pose. Hands underneath the shoulders and the knees underneath the hips. Those lovely curves of the spine, we're going to start to roll through them. So going into our cat pose, we want to round the back body, seeing if we can tuck pubic bone in towards the navel, maybe looking towards the navel. And then we drop the belly and lift the heart, lifting the sit bones, maybe lifting the gaze for cow, and then rolling back and forth. I usually think about exhaling to round into cat, and then inhaling to arch into cow. So just moving freely with the rhythm of your own breath. And we have these curves of the spine already in place. So when you next come into your scared cat, are you able to focus a little more on rounding through the lower back, where actually we have lordosis? And then when we come into our cow pose, are you able to see if you can create a little more opening through the heart, where we have general kyphosis? So we're seeing if we can concentrate on rounding the lower back a little more on your exhale into your cat, and then opening up a little more through the heart, lengthening as you inhale into your cow. So still maybe moving with the rhythm of your breath. Let's take one more round. And then see if you can come to a neutral line of the spine. So you're looking down just in front of your fingertips. And at this point, if you feel like you could add on a little bit to your balance, maybe you can bring your knees a little bit closer than hip width, and then extend the right leg back. If you need to, tuck the toes to the earth, and then just see what it might feel like to lift and hover. If you feel like you're quite stable with your balance today, maybe you start to creepy crawl your left fingers forwards on the earth. Perhaps you could even hover your left hand. Focusing your gaze, your eyes straight down will be helpful. We're going to hold for 2 more breaths. Balances will often bring us right into the moment, not necessarily feeling super poised. Bringing the hand and the knee down. Let's sink the hips back towards the heels. And don't worry if they don't touch, just push the hips back, reach the hands forwards, and then we'll come back up onto hands and knees. So we'll test that out on the other side, and you might again notice one side is far more obtainable than the other. So I like to bring my knees a fraction closer than hip width at this point. Maybe left toes touch the earth, maybe they hover. Pause with the leg for a moment, then see what you can do by bringing the right hand forwards. It could touch the earth, or perhaps you lift it and hover. We're reaching fingers away from that back heel. Don't worry if you're wibbly wobbly, but see if you can draw the lower ribs in a little bit more for stability. And then lower the hand, lower the knee. If it's obtainable, widen the knees, push the hips back towards the heels and reach hands further forwards. This might not be possible. You might have the hips a lot higher. Perhaps you're on the forearms, so I'm creating a slightly different shape here that might feel a little more obtainable. Last breath. Some of you might drop right back with the hips. And then from here, once again, we're going to return to our spine. Let's come back to our place of rebound. Perhaps it feels good to take an inhale through the nose once you find your way onto your back. And an exhale through the mouth. Here we find ourselves in our final resting pose, often referred to as Shavasana, a time for deep rest, and maybe even a time for gratitude, for accomplishing what you have accomplished today in your movement practice. When you might feel ready to add a little movement, perhaps you'll start by wiggling your fingers and your toes, making that movement greater by wiggling out more and more, perhaps turning it into a stretch before you go ahead and roll to one side, easily making your way upright. Thank you so much for joining today's mindful movement practice, and be well.